discussing up for 3 minutes, 5 minutes?
Sure.
I'm going
to cross in front of you, don't mind.
Mayoral.
May I give you 1 minute?
Okay.
I just want to recognize the people here today, and thank you very much for coming. Also, I want to recognize a few people. Daniel Wang, please stand up. Did anyone? Yeah. 2 times a city councilman. And Naomi Lam, and she's running for city council right now. And Howard Paul, he's very famous actually. Why? He's the one lost by 1 vote. So he's very famous.
I read about him. Name only won by 1 vote.
And David Chow, famous lawyer Chow, he's, you know.
I'm running for councilman in 2055.
A lot of very, very active members. I'm really happy to see, you know, all of you here today. I know you can take this time to go somewhere else and stay with family, but you care, that's why you're here. So thank you very much. And this is your time now.
Good evening. Thank y'all for coming. My name is Joe Zimmerman. My wife and I have been in Sugar Land since 1990. My mother-in-law moved here in 1980, which is why we moved here. We moved here to raise our family. We've been married 40 years this year. I've been on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 8 years, from 2000 to 2008. 6 years of those I served as chairman. On the Planning and Zoning Commission, we, like City Council, were all term limited, so I was term limited at 8 years. I came back after an overseas assignment and served for about another year. I've been on council now for 4 years, since 2012, actually since coming back from Tripoli, Libya. It's my pleasure tonight to speak to y'all. I have my educational background is I've got a civil engineering bachelor's degree from the University of Houston. I have an MBA with a concentration in finance and economics from Houston Baptist University. I have significant private sector business experience. I've done 2 startups, one a home building company, one a construction company. I've been in the land development business with Friends with Development Company from 88 through 97 for almost 10 years, and part of that time was actually with Exxon. As I said, I've worked in the consulting engineering business, which is what I do right now. I'm a consulting engineer. I work for a company called Cobb Finley. We do roads, bridges, we do highway transportation, and then we do infrastructure, water, sanitary, sewer, roads, and wastewater. So my background is very diverse. I've been around. I've been operating with City Council, I guess, since the mid-90s, even before going on as the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's a little bit about me, rather than have me talk a lot about my background. You all look like you're pretty anxious to answer questions, so why don't we get right to it?
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you say you've been in the planning and zoning for the past 8 years or 6 years?
No, I was on planning and zoning from 2000 to 2008, and then I was term limited. So I was on 8 years, but I was 6 years as chairman.
Okay.
So 6 years as chairman, still a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I was just the chairman, like Kathy Hebner is right now.
Okay, so you know pretty well about the history of the Sugar's planning and zoning.
Yes, ma'am.
And the planning and zoning is pretty quite hot topics right now. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Which?
Like what kind of city or what kind of planning you have in Sugar Land? What type of city would develop Sugar Land into? It's more business, more urban or suburban?
Well, you all get to decide that, not me. I mean, I'm your elected representative. So I was part of going back even when Daniel was on City Council. So I chaired the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. And the way we put the comprehensive plan together was we looked to City Council actually came up with a vision. I think they called it Vision 2021. And then we spent almost 2 years saying, given that vision from City Council, then how would we accomplish that vision? And out of that came the land use plan. So because we're a zone city, all the uses now in Sugar Land are actually zoned for a use. That doesn't prevent somebody from coming in and saying, I want to have a different use than what it is. But it's important to know that every piece of land in the city of Sugar Land has a zoning designation right now that if it changes, it requires somebody to go in and make an application to change that zoning designation. So it's not a decision, ma'am, that I make. It's a decision that has been made with direction from council, and council representatives were elected by you all. Okay? Yes, sir.
I do have two questions. One question, we want to know what's your opinion on the high-density apartment. The other question is how to make our community much more safer.
Let's address the apartment. I've addressed it. I've said, and I have a copy of a letter with me, I've said no apartments in Telfair. And I've said it, no apartments in Telfair South. And many people have said, well, you had asked that we look, that planning and zoning, I was one of two council members, Harish and I both, we asked, the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at one, the language of the PD, because there had been so much controversy over what the language was and what it wasn't. And also, is a 200-unit cap, is that an appropriate measure? And we sent that to Beasley. I spent a lot of time in the community talking to people, and as I did that, it became clear to me during those conversations that just putting a 200-unit cap on apartments, that doesn't solve the issue of kids. So if we allow 200 apartments and 200 kids that are currently zoned on East Clements, because that is, I think, a place where a lot of people want to go, that may be 200 kids that are displaced. That wasn't acceptable to me. So I went and I visited with the school board. I visited with Charles Dupree first, and then I went to Jim Rice and Grail James. And the conversation was around, okay, I can't directly impact zoning, but I can use the power of the office, if you will, as mayor, to have meetings. And what I've done is I've told Jim, Grail, and Charles that we probably start quarterly. And we do quarterly meetings. There'll be a joint meeting of City Council as well as the Fort Bend ISD School Board. And the intent there is not to approve a project that would have an impact on current residents for being zoned to the schools that they're, that's first and foremost. The second part of the conditions that I would propose, again, Telfair South, no apartments, period, end of story. In my mind, there's no more discussion there. Now I have to get 4 votes on council to make that happen. But in having conversations individually with council members, because remember, we can't have a discussion of a quorum or we end up being accused of a walking quorum. So I've had discussions individually with council members. I believe I have 4 votes. I know I have the relationships on city council to get 4 votes. That's significant because my opponent does not have those relationships. Go look at the motions that have been made in the past couple of years, and very often it's a motion without a second, which tells me that one, it's either not well founded or it hasn't been articulated enough to get a second. So 2 conditions, that we're going to start with. And by the way, you have to meet all 5 conditions in order for anything to proceed. And the 5 conditions would be added to the current plan development language, which doesn't have that. And I can talk to you in any level of detail that we want to talk about the language of the PD. So first and foremost is we've got to deal with the schools. Second part, which is a survey that you all, I hope, participated in, which said congestion is a big deal. And congestion is the biggest issue that people said in the city of Sugar Land that they wanted to have addressed. So the second part of my conditions are whatever the service level is for the roads that are around this particular site. If it were a service level A, in other words, you don't spend a lot of time behind a red light waiting to move, then the developer would have to, when he built whatever project he was proposing, it would have to be the same service level when he built the project. So you got to deal with schools, you got to deal with congestion. Third thing is you've got to have, it's got to be structured parking. There is no surface parking. And structured parking is similar to what we have in Sugar Land Town Center. It's also what was approved for the Imperial Market. And the Imperial Market was structured parking. So those 3. The 4th is a 4-story height limitation. That's an absolute. It's no higher than 4 stories. And then the 5th criteria that I've come up with, and again, it's because I understand the business, and I also understand the direction that I'm being given from, I believe, the public, from having had a lot of conversations. The 4th and the most important, I think, is compatibility with neighborhoods. So if you look at, so in my mind, the issue of apartments in Telfair it's solved. We had, and I'll take you all the way back to when we did the workshop. And the workshop was just that. It was a workshop where a developer said, this is what I'd like to do. It was not a consideration in action. It never was a public hearing. And the protocol always for us is, if it's a complicated, controversial topic, we're going to do a workshop to see what the concerns of the members are. If you go back and watch the tape, I had some very clear direction for the developer, which basically was not only no, but hell no. What are you people thinking? And it never got beyond that point. Our mayor, Jimmy Thompson, who's a good friend of mine, went and met with the developer and said, here's what I tell you. You've got a 7-0 vote right now, 7-0 against your project. So I would tell you to seriously consider, what you're proposing. Of course, staff had looked at that application. It was deficient. In other words, it didn't meet the criteria in the plan development, so it was returned to the developer. I know now, after City Council last week, we got briefed. There has been another PD, plan development application, that has been submitted. It has, I believe it's 300, they call them senior units. In my mind, senior is, if it's rental, it's apartments, whether it's got a senior condition or not.
Yeah.
So again, I go back to my base criteria, which is no apartments in Telfair South, and I believe I have the votes to accomplish that. So the neighborhood thing, the reason that's important is, back when we formed the Land Use Advisory Committee, and I was the councilman that kind of pushed for that, because when you look at the big box retail, and we're in this center right here, at some point in time down the future, 10, 15 years from now, that's going to redevelop. And that's going to redevelop very near neighborhoods where people live right now. And I was concerned, the mayor was concerned, others were concerned about how that would happen. Rather than us make the decision, we went out and said, look, let's get some people from the community to volunteer to be on the Land Use Advisory Committee. We'll do more or less a benchmark study, so we'll get the best and the brightest on all different kinds of uses, commercial, retail. We didn't necessarily do multifamily, but we did developments like Spring Woods, where Exxon's located. More or less cutting edge communities, and what's worked, what hasn't worked. And we said, let's educate them so that then those residents can then help us determine what kind of policy decisions we need to make in order to guide that future development. That compatibility with neighborhoods is just that kind of a policy decision, which is, if somebody were living adjacent to a commercial center, then they don't need to have somebody with a 3- or 4-story apartment backing up to where their house is. So again, you got to meet all 5 of those criteria. It's a moot point in Telfair. The criteria don't apply in Telfair because we have a letter, quite frankly, from a developer saying he wasn't going to resubmit. So the fact that he chose to resubmit something with 300 senior units, and he called them senior units, but at the end of the day, the way I view those are apartments. The letter still stands.
So from what you mentioned, passing through those 5 criteria is impossible. But my concern is it could still be possible because those 5 criteria are up to interpretation. You could interpret it in different ways. For example, the neighborhood compatibility. What is the hard code criteria you go for? Let's say, are you going to go around and do a survey or sort of thing, this kind of thing around a neighborhood? What kind of threshold you have to pass over, or what kind of rejection?
Well, here's the criteria. I can define it for you right now. And I didn't want to get into, I can talk to you in any level of detail you want to talk about. But so if you live right now and you backed up to a retail, the back of, let's say you back up to the back of the grocery store, so the Randall's. You back up to a Randall's store. And when you back up to the Randall's now, then whatever mixed use would come in there, it can't make you worse off than what you are right now. So you're already living behind with the Randalls. So if someone were to build, you know, another Randalls, or maybe they moved it out some distance, that you would not be impacted any worse off than what you are right now. That's the definition that I propose. So you're no net worse off than what you are right now.
So, well, I'm still trying to comprehend that, you know, let's say there's supposed to be an apartment or some sort of high-density buildings behind my, you know, my house, all right?
Yeah, that wouldn't work, because that's not, do you have high-density buildings behind your house now?
So it's just that single voting by myself, say, okay, I don't like it, I don't want it to be built there. Does that just count to reject the whole thing, or how does that work? I'm still kind of lost a little bit.
Okay, well, that gets written into the code. Then what ends up happening is you have to meet that criteria in order for it to be deemed a complete application. If you don't meet it, it gets rejected, so it doesn't get approved.
So as long as there's neighborhood rejection or objection to that, there will be no vote.
As long as it's not like the neighborhood gets it's not a vote. Okay, the criteria is, and you can help shape the criteria. There's going to be public hearings. So what's going to happen now when we go back and consider this is P&Z now has recommended, they said, no cap, no revision to the language. They're bound by 3 documents. They're bound by the comprehensive plan, they're bound by the development code, and they're bound by the zoning regulations. Same things that I was bound by when I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Council's not bound by that. We're your elected representatives. So regardless of what P&Z recommends, we can then change that. So what I'm saying to you is, given the plan development language the way it's written right now, these are 5 additional conditions that I would put on that. And those 5 conditions would be part of the language, so that if you didn't meet, it's the entirety of the language that you have to meet those conditions. These 5 conditions are, in my mind, critical as I've thought through how to do this and how not to have it impact people. Those are the 5 conditions that I've identified. I'm happy to, you know, consider other conditions, but as I've thought through it and listened to the community, those are the 5 conditions that...
So these are still staying on a conceptual level, not really on a tangible, you know, criteria level yet.
Well, they're on the conceptual level, because as I said before, it has to be, I have to get 4 votes. If anybody tells you they can get...
elected first, then.
Well, you gotta get elected first, but in order to get anything accomplished on council, you gotta get 4 votes. I mean, it's a seven-person council. The mayor does vote, so he gets to weigh in, but you gotta get 4 votes to get anything passed. I mean, it's just practically, that's the way it works.
Are you going to put your 5 criteria into the development code?
Yes.
You're going to do that?
Yes, it's going to become part of the. So here's the way it breaks down. The comprehensive plan is actually a guide. That it guides staff, it guides the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it guides the council according to what council established at the time, Vision 2021. And then, so that's a guideline. The actual language of the development code and the zoning regulations, which is chapter 2, and those different zoning, that's the law, that's the ordinance.
Yeah.
And that's the criteria that any developer, or any of us, I mean,
So you're going to put your 5 criteria in?
I'm going to put, oh, absolutely, yeah. Now, on the school part, what I'll do is I'll probably have to do a school impact analysis. And that school impact analysis will give some very base criteria, but at the end of the day, the meeting with the school board is intended to establish a communication link that doesn't exist now at the council and the Fort Bend ISD board level. And then you use that criteria then to drive those decisions in. But yeah, the intent is absolutely to write it into the PD language, which is part of the zoning regulation, which is part of the development code. Yes, sir.
Question there.
Yeah, can I have a
Yes, ma'am.
So from what I heard, the planning and the zoning
Yes, ma'am.
committees seem
Yes,
to
ma'am.
be a window for people from communities to speak up or to say, have a voice.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm curious that, you know, we don't have any Chinese American in the community, the committee now.
Right.
How can we get a voice
I mean, in such a basic forum to say something. Because now it's good that you are here to hear us. And it's good that, I mean, thank you for letting us know your stance, for all those issues. But in the future, we will have new issues. So we want to have a voice for our community, right? So how can we?
Well, there's several ways. We have right now we have Sugarland 101, which was set up to help people understand the business of the city and how to participate. And it's a program. You make an application online. So many people get selected. There's also certainly boards and commissions. So we go through a boards and commissions application process every year. What I am hearing from people, and I think I'm hearing that from you now, is people aren't aware of when the process is. It's mostly driven by an online process. We're going to have to do a better job of communicating. Every year, council looks at every board and commission seat, and we decide, if it's 8 years, and if in fact it's not a critical skill level, then those positions rotate on and off after 8 years. But many times people are moving. Those positions are changing because people are either moving on because of their own choice, or they're moving on with a career change and moving out of the city, and that opens up positions on all those boards and commissions. And then what we do is we go in and we look at those applications. There's some real, basic questions that people have to answer, and then we actually interview those candidates. And what we're looking for is people that are passionate about serving on that particular board and commission, be it planning and zoning, be it the zoning board of adjustment, be it the parks board. There's a number of commissions. A lot of like the land use advisory is a committee that we form, but we very often go out to the public, ask for people to sign up based on being interested.
So basically, it's decided by mayor and the council.
Just based on those. And it's really a level of interest for people.
Okay, is there a cut line somewhere? Because some people in this room applied.
Yeah,
last year they all, but then we actually asked the same question to your proponent, and he said he didn't even see the application from none of the Chinese people.
So to be safe, like last year, there are several P&Z committee position available. So we have for like 6-7 people applied, and all of them got rejected.
Even before you guys.
More than that.
Oh, well, less than 20.
Yeah, dozens of people.
Mr. Zimmerman, I ask the same question to Mr. Jiaju.
Sure.
How many people apply for a P&Z committee?
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. Including myself, we're all engineers.
Okay, sure.
Specialists. We're not just like a waiter or waitress, like someone just got a job. We're all experienced, but none of us, in fact, I'm not even opposing high density apartment. I still don't get elected. They oppose things, they don't. I'm not opposing. Right. No one has even considered that one of us can be in the committee, but we're unfortunately none of us.
Do you aware of that?
I didn't. Here's what happens is the applications go in on the website. Linda, who is the secretary, puts those together in a large book. If the applications are complete, I think it's true that she doesn't pass them along. I'll look in. Here's my commitment. I'll look into the process of what we're doing and why we're doing it. The fact of the matter is, we don't look at somebody and say, well, they're going to be for what I think they ought to be for, and that's how we're going to put them on the commission. I can tell you that doesn't happen. We look at we look at their background, we look at their experience. There are times when we're on, and I'll use the Parks Board as an example, where we were looking for people with specific skill levels, like an architect, like a land planner, like a commercial artist. We felt we needed those skills to balance it out, not just, and I'm an engineer, I'm proud of being an engineer, but at the end of the day, we were looking for other people to represent. P&Z has been a place where we have typically recruited engineers. That's where I was recruited because of my background, just like many of you are. I can't tell you why you didn't make the interview process. I mean, I'll commit to look into it because the process is the same tax as you all are. The third one I tell you is, for me, is economic development. We enjoy the lifestyle that we enjoy here because way back even before Daniel, before he was on council, we made a conscious decision that we were going to balance our community with residential and commercial. Back in the day, that was 60% residential, 40% commercial. The reason that's important is because that commercial subsidizes all of our lifestyles. Because they're not involved day to day. I mean, they work 8 to 10 hour days and then they're gone, as opposed to us. So it's important to have that commercial. You've seen us during Jimmy's a personal friend of mine. We've had an unprecedented expansion. We've had United Healthcare, we've had First Data, we've had Texas Instruments, we've had Schlumberger now, name us. And those were all conscious decisions where we sat down and said, is this a business that we're interested in? Is this a business that we want? Because many times they want a tax abatements in order to invest. And we've been willing to do that under what the law allows us to do, but we require trade-offs. So we expect you to create X number of jobs at a certain income level. And if you don't, we claw some of that money back. No different than we would do in our businesses. We run it like a business. We're very serious about running it like a business. And I personally, I'm very proud of that. I mean, Daniel and I, before we ever got involved in council, when I was a developer, he did my geotech and materials engineering. It was always about relationships and people doing what they said they're going to do. And that's the kind of experience I bring to city council. Does that explain a lot better? I mean, these were intended to be, like, as you said, broad objectives, but I mean, I can talk in whatever way.
Speaking of infrastructure, on Highway 6, these days, the traffic is getting worse and worse every day, right? How congested?
Yes.
Any plan, do you have any plan going forward?
Yeah, let's talk about a couple of those things.
Because this is kind of related to the apartment complex issue as well, right? If you have high density apartment complex.
Well, that's the reason why I put the congestion in, is to make sure that we don't get any worse than what we are. So for Highway 6, from Brook Street to Lexington, we've taken what I'll call a pretty extraordinary position that we're going to widen Highway 6. And it's very expensive. Fortunately, we've got some state money that we're going to add to that. We're going to probably have to do some condemnation from some businesses in order to get the right-of-way. But we're going to expand that capacity. That's really not available most of the time. We're going to have to use technology to solve that. And here's what we've done. Trafficware, who is a company that's based in Sugar Land, and they're, I'm going to call them what they are, they're tech guys. And they're very good. And they've developed a pod that we put at intersections. So think of a four-way intersection. So we ring the intersection. And it provides real-time data to our traffic control center, which we have over in our public works, so that we know if we've got congestion at a particular intersection. And it allows us to make real-time adjustments based on the information that we're getting. That's an example of the kind of technology, we just can't pave the world. So we're going to have to use that technology to help us drive efficiencies in our system. We do that, I'll give you another example, we do that right now in water and wastewater. So it's very expensive, and I'll take the sanitary lines. It's very expensive to go dig deep sanitary lines up and then replace that. And there's a technology called pipe bursting, so you can take lines that are in fairly poor shape, and you can do it. It's almost like an extrusion process that lines that sanitary line and will give it additional life. So another additional useful life of another 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. At some point in time, we may have to end up taking that pipe out of the ground. We had to do that recently over in Venetian Estates. It was old clay pipe that when we looked at it, when we TV'd the lines, the clay was actually gone. So, but the point that I'm trying to make is we'll continue to use technology to drive decisions that we make to where it is better for us to where it's not as expensive for us as consumers to the extent that it's available. And we continue to look at new technologies all the time in order to drive that kind of stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, one last question regarding safety again.
Yes, sir.
Do you support the idea to have surveillance camera in each neighborhood entrance and exit? Somebody I think proposed that idea to have surveillance camera installed at each neighborhood entrance and or the major traffic crossroads.
Well,
I think we're doing some of that.
We're doing some of that in the license plate recognition system that I talked to you about earlier. But it's not driven. It's driven to capture everybody that comes in and goes out of the city. To where and then what we've done is we've said for HOAs, to the extent that an HOA wants to, like monitor every intersection like what you're talking about, then we would then share our specifications for how we did that so that we have a compatible system. And we've done I think we've done a very thorough job of making sure that, because all that stuff that's in those license plate recognition, we keep them, I think it's 45 days. We originally talked about keeping it for 30 days, but we said there's a lot of people that travel, a lot of people travel out of the country. We didn't want to have somebody be out of the country and not be able to access those people in case something happened, so we decided to keep it for 45 days. It's very tightly controlled. There's only a few people that have access to it. And we're not interested in who's in the car. We're only interested in the license plate and then running down that data. Yeah,
I
yes,
think
ma'am.
that if we can, if the city or the police, they catch a person by using that tool, then that will deter just.
Yeah, it'll deter, yes ma'am.
Yeah,
I think the more that we've had a lot of discussions around, in most things that we have, any of us can make an open records request and get a hold of whatever data, short of something that's confidential client attorney privilege, I guess would be an example. For this particular system, we've just chosen not to wrap it under, I'm not sure how we did it, client attorney privilege.
We spend so much money on that. I'm assuming we spend so much money
Yes, ma'am.
on that, but there's no case that is addressed by using those tools. Then there's no use for it.
Well, we had a case, and this is one that the police chief used with us. We had somebody that was on the FBI 10 most wanted list, came through the city. And we were able, through the license plate recognition cameras, to understand when they came through and when they went out. And they were actually able to pick up somebody on the FBI 10 most wanted list based on input from the city of Sugar Land and our license plate recognition cameras. So we know that we know based on that. There's other examples that it does work, and now it's a matter of just designing it for the rest of Sugar Land. But we did it like a business. I mean, we did it like a beta project where okay, the technology looks good, everything looks good, how's it drive? Well, we wanted to drive it for a year before we went and spent about $6 million to roll it across the rest of the city.
Yeah, the budget is big. Sounds like very big. So how are you going to get a budget? Are you going to raise the test, or what's your?
Now here's what I've been a proponent of is our tax rate right now in Sugar Land is 31595. Call it 32 cents. And for 32 cents, what you get is police, fire, EMS, public works, and parks and rec. And if you compare that, we're the second lowest tax rate in the state for a city of our size. What's more important to me is for the services that we provide. What we've chosen to do, because many of us have seen, I didn't bring my appraisal with me, but my appraisal on my townhouse went up more than 10%. And we've chosen to give people, if we reduce the tax rate, the corporations get the reduction. If we increase the homestead exemption, and we did this past year, we increased the homestead exemption to 8%. When you do the math, 8% is about a 2.5 cent decrease. So now our tax rate, instead of 32 cents, is 29.5 cents. I would think that this year, what I would want to do is increase the homestead exemption again. I can't tell you what it's going to go to again. It requires a council action. But given the appraisal values that I've talked to the appraisal district, I've talked to some of the homeowners, and I think I know where people are in terms of their tax bills. So we provide that tax relief by increasing the homestead exemption. Yes, sir, Howard?
Joe, I only have easy question.
They're all easy, right?
You mentioned that your position is 0 apartment in Fairway South, but Mr. Jiaju said his position is 200 apartment with no cap. So can you just answer that?
Yep. Again, I go back to no apartments, because that's what the developer committed to. He committed to, with a letter, that he would not have any apartments. And the question is, what's the trade-off for apartments? Well, the trade-off, quite frankly, in my mind, which is an unacceptable trade-off for me, is congestion. There's got to be a school impact if there's school-age kids. So there's a school impact. There's probably a congestion impact. It depends on where you locate, the apartments. It depends on what roads they have access to. So that's the reason I said, no apartments in Telfair. That's what the developer committed to. That's what he wrote the letter to the mayor that I have a copy of. He said, we're not going to, yes ma'am.
But there could be somewhere else in Sugar Land?
Well, that's why I came up with the 5 criteria, because you could have, that's the only developable land we have left that's open space.
Because last time we signed a petition to, against high-density apartment in the Telfair.
Right.
But maybe you change mind, you're gonna build some apartment, somewhere else in Sugar Land.
That's why you have the 5 criteria that governs whether there would be any of that. Yeah, let me finish first. So I got the message loud and clear. People don't want apartments. And so no apartments in Telfair South. That was the commitment that was made. When you take these 5 criteria and you roll that into the plan development language, it becomes very, very hard to do any apartments at all, period. The only other place that there could be apartments would be redevelopment areas. There couldn't be any more in the north what I call North Telfair, because that's a PD and that's already.
North Telfair, where? Is next to HEB, the new HEB?
Well,
they're building lots of construction work over there.
Yeah, there could be over there. There could be there, but again, when you roll this,
they are building,
should be nowhere in Sugar Land.
Yeah,
no
when you look at this criteria, that criteria is going to make it very hard, because remember I said you got to meet all 5. 1, you can't displace any kids. You got to deal with the congestion. That's going to be very hard to do, to deal with congestion. That's the reason I put it in there. You got to deal with the neighborhood compatibility. That's the reason I put it in there, because it's very hard to do. Then you've got a height limitation, and then you've got structured parking and no surface parking. Structured parking drives apartments by about 12 to 15,000 per unit is what the cost impact is. So those 5 criteria, there are no absolutes, I guess is what you're asking. What I've done is I've designed a system that makes it as absolute as it can be. I don't agree with the 200 units, because the 200 units does not solve what I've heard from the community that the issues are. Doesn't solve schools, doesn't solve congestion. I mean, 200 units is just that. That's 200, depending on what acreage you put it in. I live in a townhouse, so let's look at, and you all, I'm guessing it's probably, call it lot density 3, so probably, I'm guessing that most people here are 3 lots per acre. Townhouses end up being around, I'm guessing that we're around 12 units per acre. So let's say two cars per resident, so you got 6. I got 24. So when you put that congestion on the roads, that's the issue with the congestion. That's why the congestion requires them to solve it. If you can't solve it, you can't build them. And you got to meet all 5 criteria. So it becomes, remember I was a developer years ago, it's been a long time ago, but I understand the process because I worked in Clear Lake. We did Clear Lake, Fairfield, Copperfield, Kingwood, Deerfield. It was Friendswood Development Company.
My concern is the 5 criteria, how this 5 criteria is carried out, especially for the public hearing. In Sugar Land, most parents are, I don't say most, a lot of parents are working parents. So it's very hard for us to make time to go to a public hearing. So if we miss that, we miss it. We don't see what is going on in the public hearing. All we hear is some other people tell us. So if you can make the public hearing, it's more open to, like you put it into the internet. So people, residents can see it later. We don't have restricted to certain times, certain days, and more open to more residents.
Yes, ma'am. We have to do a better job, and I hear what you're saying. We've got to do a better job of getting out, even though we post it. That requires that you go and look for it.
Yeah.
And we have to reach out to you either through the HOAs, through community leaders, people that are willing to take those kinds of emails. I mean, we do, I think it's quarterly meetings with the HOAs, but it's still not getting the information out to the people, because that's what I'm hearing from you all. And I get that. My wife and I both work. We worked when my daughter was growing up. My daughter's grown and gone now, but they're a professional couple too. My daughter and her husband both work, and like all of us, they don't have a lot of time for extracurricular activities, raising a 2.5-year-old and now getting ready to have a new baby. So we've got to do a better job of figuring that out. We communicate and get people up to speed with what's going on and why it's going on. Let me address your original question. The criteria that goes, the 5 conditions that I placed, gets written into the PD process. That's not something that you have to worry about going out and saying. It either meets it or it doesn't meet it. And staff will make that decision based on the code. And if it doesn't meet it, it gets denied. So it ends up coming forward with a staff. Remember I said it had to have a staff recommendation. If it doesn't meet the code, then it ends up getting it gets rejected and returned to the developer until it does.
I have two more questions. Time's almost up. So 2 more questions. Jackson and
I'll try to make it short. You know, the way we found out with politics, or maybe politicians, is that every time we voted somebody into the office, and on that very particular day, you know, the people get into the office, they no longer represent us anymore. So as a mayor, when you got into the office, I'm not really speaking of you, but what are you going to do to avoid a conflict of interest? All right, when it comes to decision making, how do you make sure those people who receive contributions from external parties like builders or developers from making that decisions for us?
That's a very good point. Guys, here at the end of the day, it involves, if you'll look at my background and you'll ask people, when I make a commitment or I give you my word, I fulfill that. And I build a reputation. The reason I've got a great reputation in business is because of that. Have I taken contributions by developers? Yes, I have. When I sit on the dais, for this campaign, when I sit on the dais, when I'm representing the public, you can go ask any developer. Those developers know that I'm representing the public. It doesn't make a hill of beans. Those guys are all friends of mine. I grew up with a lot of those guys. I was a developer. From 1988 to 1997, I worked for Friendswood Development Company. We took our development responsibilities very seriously. I know many of the developers here. Many of the developers in the community are friends of mine. They also know that when I tell them that I'm not going to do something, I'm not going to do it. And they also know that if there's something that's written in the code, that I expect them to meet the code. Because when I sit up on the dais, I'm representing the public. I'm not representing the developer. And I've had many conversations, you can research it as much as you want, where I'm probably not a popular guy right now because of the stance I've taken on apartments. And one of the concerns I had by opening up the 200-unit cap was just that. I had a letter from a developer. The mayor had a letter from a developer. We had a letter from a developer saying no apartments. And now if there's a cap of 200, I can tell you what's going to happen. Well, how about you just said I could have 200? No. You made the commitment. Now you got to live by the commitment.
Yeah, there's no question about integrity, but we're trying to say, to see things from system-wise, to see how do we, systematically prevent such things from happening, because it happens everywhere. People take money, they represent the people, whoever, support them financially, right? I mean, that's kind of a natural thing.
That's not the way. Look, I give my firm, Copet, is the company that I work for. Do we make political contributions? Yes, we do. Is there any kind of an expectation, a quid pro quo? No, sir, there's not. The fact of the matter is when you run for office, it will take, I probably spent close to, and this is all public record, you can look at this. I probably spent close to $60,000 to $80,000. Daniel, what did you spend when you ran?
More than that.
Yeah. And unless you're able to write your own checks, you're not going to be able to afford to run for public office. I don't have to agree with it. In fact, I don't agree with it. I don't agree that we should have to incur those kind of expenses to run. But the practical matter is when you print up signs and you do all these different activities, you do ads, you go on radio, maybe you do some TV. The fact of the matter is that does cost money. Our city council salary, the mayor makes, I think he's double what we get. I think we get $800 a month and a $500 car allowance. And that covers me, and I can tell you how many hours I spend because I track it. I spend anywhere from 18 to 28 hours a week on city council business. So, and I do that because it's important for me to be involved in the community. That's what I believe. That's what my wife believes. I've always believed in being involved in the community. And some of that's because I've been in the engineering business. I've seen how screwed up they've got the city of Houston from good people not being willing to serve. My opponent worked for the city of Houston for 30 years. You think he knows how to run a business? I doubt it.
Last question.
Okay, last question.
Yes, ma'am.
I think everybody knows Chinese American is living in Sugarland City. It's a relatively high percentage. But in the city council and also the subcommittee, we believe Chinese American is underrepresented. So on our side, we will participate more. But if you get elected as mayor, how will you promote that, the diversity?
I've gotten this question from a lot of the Pakistani community, from the Muslim community. Now here's my commitment. My commitment is to get people involved. I'll do what I'm thinking about doing right now is doing some kind of an advisory committee for me. What I would also tell you is it's important for us, and I'm going to mentor people. Daniel, I think you do that right now. So it's important to get people that are interested involved so that they get involved in the boards and commissions. That's not the only way. If you decide that you want to run for council, then that's fine. That's an individual decision. But my commitment to you is that I will get involved with your community. I will get involved with individuals in your community that express an interest to get on the city council, and I'll work with them to get on either boards or commissions or to become involved in city council. That's a commitment that I can make personally. And I've made that commitment personally. I'll make the same commitment to you. I've had the same commitment from the Pakistani community. I've had the same commitment or the same question from the Muslim community, because a lot of people are wanting to serve and bring whatever skills they have, to the forefront, and that's important. The fact of the matter is, like, Daniel, when did you go out?
2008.
2008, and then we had Thomas, and then he went out right after you.
Right, exactly.
2010?
Yeah, exactly.
2010.
So give me 1 minute, because our organizers want me to say 1 minute. So I want to have a message to you all, and my message is go out to vote. I mean, ask your friends to go out to vote. Whoever you vote for, you make your own decision. I mean, the reason why I got involved, Naomi got involved, is we want to encourage our Chinese American community to get involved. And voting is very powerful. You don't realize. We talk about how important one vote short. It's not only that. Just because you vote, you are on the record, and everybody will look at that after election and saying, hey, are we coming out to vote? A lot of people ask me, why endorse Joe? And I know Harish very, very well. Good friends, we talk all the time. We sit down and talk, and I know Joe also very, very well. And the two reasons why I endorse Joe is because you all heard both candidates, and tremendous experience in PNC and also in Sugar Land. And I tell you, if he want to do what he want to do, he will achieve that.
Wait a second, you endorse Joe? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes, I personally endorse Joe personally, but that's for your own decision. Because I'd like you to go out and vote for your candidate. Okay, I'm not trying to say one way or the other, but people ask me about that, and because of two reasons: because his tremendous experience, he understands, and especially Sugar Land is getting older, so his redevelopment plan for Sugar Land is not only just new land anymore; it's a redevelopment plan. And second reason, he just talked about that. He has 4 votes. And it's true. And whoever comes in as a mayor has no 4 votes. I'm sure he will use it, if Harris become mayor, he will use his puppet, his so-called bully puppet to push. But he already got 4 votes. Much easier. I tell you, whatever you say there, actually, if he want to do it, he can do it. But the reason, we need to show him the reason. The only reason is you all come out to vote. I'll go to Joe and say, look, this election, I have all these Chinese come out to vote. I tell you, whatever you say, he can make it happen. That's very easy in terms of the appointment. I was there before. I know how it works. He knows much better in terms of being a mayor. So 2 reasons why I probably endorse Joe. Nothing against Harish. I told Harish out there already. We are still good friends, and I can still continue to work with him. If he becomes mayor, I think we will still can go out and talk to him. But I think Joe's experience and Joe's knowing the city hall, and also, like I said, 4 votes. He's not that powerful as a mayor, tell the truth. He has only 1 vote. But he can use his bully puppet to push all the decision, and that's the reason I thought. I know Naomi will have something to say. You're welcome to say that.
It's relationships, folks. It's all about relationships.
I know. I want to talk to Joe because 4 years ago, and I came out to run against the apartments. 625, remember? 625, 400, 600 units. And at that time, you were serving the plan zoning, you were running for the position too. But 5 years later, how many years you're serving there? 4 years later. 4 years later. Here apartments come back in again. How come? I thought you got a message last time. How come you didn't get a message again? Now, why would you turn down our 3,100 people's petitions? And why would you allow this apartment issue? Now you have 4 wonderful points. Why didn't you put it out before the election coming? If you will have that vision, then I will have to come out to run again because I'm against the apartment. So I want you to give me an answer. If you become a mayor, what can you do? I mean, you're going to change the position
That's
again?
very easy because I knew how it worked in terms of city council.
Yeah, but I'm saying
because I knew
that
what it, go ahead.
I'm afraid if you become a mayor, you have 4 votes and you become very powerful, and our apartment issue coming back and it's all going to be passed. We're going to have a problem on our hands.
You've got your petition, the petition that was signed. Well, let's talk about that because that's a great example. That petition didn't meet state law. It didn't meet city law. So we didn't consider that petition. Now let's talk about had that petition gone through. That petition was going to rescind zoning ordinance 2014. That includes the building codes, the development codes, and the zoning regulations. We got an opinion from an attorney. I'm happy to share the opinion with you. It's public information. And had we put that on the ballot and had it passed, and I think with a lot of the misinformation that was out there, it would have passed, we'd have had no building code, we'd have had no development code, we'd have had no development, we'd have had no zoning regulations. And what we'd have then had, instead of 900 apartments that were being proposed, that were never supported, by the way, there could have been 9,000, because we'd have been precluded from state law from ever considering that for 1 year. And that's the kind of, that's when what I'd ask you all as voters, and it's an individual decision, just make sure that you're informed on what it is that you're signing. There was a lot of stuff. I had friends of mine that signed it, and then later when they came back and said, well, what do you mean we don't have? I said, here's the ordinance. I had a copy of it. Had that ordinance been rescinded, there would have been none of that. Now, let me address your point, Naomi, because we've had this discussion before. The apartments, in a planned development, apartments are an allowed use. And you cannot prohibit by law a particular use. You can control it, like what I've said. If you look, we've got an R4 zoning classification. Nobody's ever used it. We've used the development, the planned development in the development code to drive things like, and when you look at the way the code was written, it was written for an urban PD, and it was written for a suburban planned development. The urban planned development, the example was Sugar Land Town Center. So what staff did was they went and said, okay, if we were going to do that kind of a development, which is a denser development, then what would that criteria be? And it was written in the code that way. The suburban PD was where I live over in Lake Point, which has a Whole Foods. It's got some density with townhouses. There's no condos there. There's apartments, or there's a hospital. There's medical office, but it's a denser, it's a less dense use than what was over at Town Center. I've heard loud and clear what people want or what they don't want in what I call is Telfair South, and that's the reason that the mayor went out and met with the developer. That's the reason that, and the mayor was very clear to the developer. I wasn't at that meeting, but he said, he told me that what he told him was, before you write that letter, be clear, because if you write, the developer made a verbal commitment then, he said, I'm just not going to do any apartments. He said, that's fine, if that's what you want to do. But if you write that letter, that's what you're going to do, because that's what council's going to rely on. He wrote the letter. We didn't coerce him into writing the letter. He wrote the letter on his own. So I intend to hold him to that commitment, and I believe I've got 4 votes to do that. And I believe with the 5 conditions I proposed, it is a very, there may not be a probability of 0, but it's pretty darn low that anybody could ever do apartments anywhere in Sugar Land. So,
is that letter and the 5 criteria public information?
I've actually published that on my website, on my Facebook page, and I'd be happy to provide you a copy of it.
I mean, the letter and the 5.
Oh, we did have a news conference where we
Try to get it out there.
I went over. I didn't go into as much level of detail as what I went with y'all, but I mean, I clearly highlighted the 5 points. I've gone into a lot more detail tonight, but that was appropriate because you got
5 points as well as the letter from the developer.
Yeah. I've actually got a copy of the letter. You're welcome to look at it.
Can I ask a very quick question?
Yes, sir.
I know it's the end of the question cycles. Regarding the homestead exemption system, what is your current proposal for the deduction? Do you have a specific number?
Yeah, no, because I haven't seen the budget. So we're getting ready to come into the new budget cycle. What I do know is that we've got that the assessed values, like in my own case, I think mine was over 10%. State law,
most of us does.
Yeah, state law caps it at 10%.
Okay.
But what it also ends up happening is, I call it the law recapture. So it's 10% this year, but if the AB holds for next year, they pick up the rest of it next year. So the homestead, what the homestead exemption does, it increases the exemption, which gets subtracted off that value, and then you end up with that reduction, like the 2.5 cents. I'm going to guess that it's going to be somewhere between 1 and, it's 8% now, I'm going to guess it goes to either 9 or 10.
It's still not enough, but that's, reason being that if you being elected as mayor, if I'm being elected, I like to have very good budget. So I can't, naturally, I don't want.
I'm a business guy, so I don't care about a big fat budget. I ran companies, I did turnarounds for 4 different companies. So what I want to do, the way I do the budget process, and the way I've done it the 4 years I've been on council, is I go through it line item by line item, department by department. That's the process. We spend, I think it's 7 meetings at 2 hours a meeting, and we go through staffing. And having run a number of different businesses, I know how all that works. So if the goal is, I haven't heard anybody yet say, I want you to cut this service. I haven't heard anybody say, I want you to cut police protection, fire protection, EMS, Parks and Rec, or anything else. So the zero-based process that we go through is providing the same level of service that we did last year. And what's that going to cost? And how many staff is that going to take? And that's what I look at, is looking at that. Now, the only exception to that is the capital improvement plan, when what you've seen, if you go back in time, even when I think, Daniel, when you were on it, was probably in the, what, 30s or 40 million. And now we're up to a CIP, because we're becoming an older city. Our CIP is around 60 million a year. It's projected to be that, even though we only fund it 1 year at a time. We have a 5-year CIP, and I think it's around 260 million. So we can expect it's going to be around 60 million a year from here on out. And that does include the park bonds, which were, let me talk about that, because I think that's important. When we did the park bond, the public passed 2 of the 3 propositions. About $31 million was the total. That equates to about 3.1 cents. It's about a penny for every 10 million of debt that you issue. To date, we've only taken 0.7 of a cent. And you gave us the green light to take 3 cents. We've taken 0.7 of a cent because we've done a pay as you go. And I'm back to the, I pay the same tax rate you do. Right. So it's important that we manage the resources that we have within the budget that we have. And what we did was we made a conscious decision. We take the 0.7 because we thought, projecting forward, you do an estimate of what that budget's going to be, even though we're not in that budget cycle. And we said, we think we can do a pay as you go. So let's see if that works out. Because every year we'll have, it's a balanced budget, so revenue is supposed to equal expenses, and they do. And every year if we get rollovers, then we'll invest in, like in 2011, when we had the extreme drought, 2012, we ended up putting in almost $2 million into fixing sidewalks. That wouldn't have been a normal expense. Now, what made us allow to do that? We had a $1.8 million carryover. So our revenue exceeded expenses, so we carried it over and we put it into that. And we will typically do just that. I mean, we run it just like all of us run our businesses. If we have excess revenues, then we'll put those in immediately into projects. We have, in our financial management policy standards, we have minimum fund balances that we have to maintain. That was put in place, that was even before you were on council, I think, Dan.
Pretty much. But when politicians talk, he talk long, so
yeah,
cut it short.
Yeah, anyway,
thank you.
Yeah, I can talk about budget all night long.
Summarize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, we're good. Folks, I've got push cards up here if you'd like one. And I'm happy, I've got business cards. If you want a business card, you want to have a discussion, maybe not tonight.